a sword. It was larger, thicker, heavier, and cruder than any normal blade. By all accounts, it was no more than a hulking mass of iron.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of DumpStat. I am the Void, the monster, the person that gives you speeding tickets. I am Lich Brill, and you're not Doc.
Nope.
Who the hell are you?
I am Aleric, the little lizard man.
Oh, I see. Why are you here, little lizard man?
Well, you don't need to talk to Doc anymore, and I felt I might be of some use.
Well, thank you, Aleric, the little lizard man. I'm glad that you've kidnapped my co-host and are now hosting with us through our terrible sending stones.
That is what minions are for.
Fantastic. I was going to talk about kobolds. Do you know things about kobolds, little minion boy?
I do.
Okay. So, I believe that you and I have both talked about kobolds at length before privately.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I am a fan of the little minions, and we've been kind of going through the minion races. Your bullywugs, your orcs, your goblins, your gnolls, your kuatoas, these little tiny things that seem to work for other creatures, your big bads. And one that has been commonplace and has weaseled his way into the hearts of all D&D players happened to be the kobold, which are these little, how would you describe them? Little lizard people?
Yeah, so I would describe kobolds as a small little lizard person who believes it's related to dragons. Earlier editions kept saying that they were dog-like, but then kept drawing them very lizard-like. So now we've finally got it organized and they're lizard people.
Little lizard people that remind me a lot of like Goombas and Koopa Troopas in the sense that they're working for a big bad, but it's expanded. What if that Goomba had ideas, a race, a people, a thinking thing? It expands quite a bit. And since they're such an early edition race, there's a lot of lore on these guys.
Yeah, they've been around since basically the first edition. Like if you look at some of the early starter sets, they have you fight kobolds. They're a good intro monster that's not overly reminiscent of your standard fantasy that you experience as like a Lord of the Rings. It looks like a distinct thing, and that helps set D&D a bit apart from your typical swords and sorcery.
I think the reason why so many people love them is because not only are they quirky, but they've kind of become this, I don't know, favorite little thing for players to face and for players to actually play. They are a playable race now in 5e.
Yes.
That being said, you have these little lizard people who are crafty and tricksy and strange and believe that they're dragons, or at least related to dragons. So they maneuver their way through life in this very, I guess you might call it a Napoleon complex. And I guess that quirkiness that they have of being like, we're true, we're related to Tiamat, we're related to the great dragons. And at the flip side, having them be this kind of worthless, very killable little monster is not only fun, but I think it's endearing. I think it's one of the reasons why they've kind of walked their way into the hearts and mind of people.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So kobolds have these grand aspirations as they're kin to dragons. They are dragons. They view themselves as dragons.
Right.
But at the same time, they are one of the weakest monsters, and they're kind of aware of that too. They use traps. They use sneaky tactics when they fight. They don't fight like a dragon fights. So there is an inherent juxtaposition of worldview and reality inherent in kobolds that a lot of people like. I like it.
So your standard kobold is tiny. It's for an early party. You're not going to really be throwing kobolds at a higher end party as a DM. And like you said, when you're fighting a kobold, how does a kobold fight? It's going to be tricksy. You just said they're going to use traps, correct?
Right. So kobolds are not powerful. Generally, even at first level, you get a good hit on a kobold, it goes down. So kobolds fight using numbers, they fight using traps, they fight using pets. Those are like the three main angles they have. A lot of times I see kobolds as a defensive species. Like you hear a lot about raiding, like orcish raiders. That's a very standard thing. You don't hear as much kobold raiders because a lot of kobold tactics don't really work as well on the offensive. They're much more fun, if you will, if you're invading their territory, because they like to use a lot of ranged weapons. They like to use a lot of traps. And some of the more unusual D&D traps are generally seen with kobolds. They have a lot of goo-related traps. They have a lot of simple machine traps, like your levers, your pulleys, your spring-loaded whatsits
and hoo-has.
Yeah.
So when you're, like you just said about them not being raiders, you're not going to really see... You're not going to be in a town and over the hill comes a swarm of kobolds. You're going to be in like a tunnel. They love to dig. They're tunneling people. They're very good at it. And you're going to be in a tunnel or a cave or maybe in a city sewer system.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you're going to hit that rot grub trap or some kind of weird fire trap and then they'll spring on you and they'll speak to each other in a language that is like slang draconic, yip yak, right?
Yes.
Where they yip and snicker, and it's kind of draconic, but it's more its own dialect and thing, just to help promote this aesthetic of they're almost dragons, whatever that means.
It's such a wonderfully precise detail.
Yeah, I mean they're not going to really be a big threat to anybody, and they're usually working for dragons. So as a DM, when you look at them, you should kind of see the ultimate minion in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
They're silly, they're quirky, they have grandiose ideas, but they're going to be working for a black dragon or a green dragon or a red dragon. And what I think is a lot of fun as a DM when you're using kobolds is whomever the kobolds are working for is going to inherently affect that tribe. So if you're working for, let's say a blue dragon, those kobolds are seeing that blue dragon as kind of like a pseudo god / aspirational thing to achieve, even though they're being belittled and killed by it, most likely. So they look at this blue dragon who's charismatic and smart and manipulative, but powerful and very, very evil. And those kobolds under him in this desert climate are not only going to reflect that desert burrowing climate, but they're also going to try to respect that blue dragon, whether that's painting their scales blue, or if they meet an adventurer trying to puff their chests out like, yes, I am just as elegant as my master is. Or trying to maybe use more traps that incorporate a blue dragon's breath weapon, which is lightning. You have these very fun, customizable options depending on where the kobolds are. A kobold in a city sewer system versus working for a swampish black dragon are going to be two wildly different kinds of minions. They're all kind of the same in the sense of what they can or can't do. They're always going to be good at tunneling. They're always going to use traps. They're always going to be kind of tricksy, kind of not, but they're never going to be completely alike when you compare them to other kobolds.
Kobolds are a fun tool in that they serve to amplify the main message. A lot of times with D&D, you can get a little bit muddled in what you're trying to convey to your party. And it's good to use kobolds for this purpose because they can help to fill out a dungeon, fill out an adventure, fill out a concept in a way that actually amplifies the bigger message of whatever you're trying to say, whether that's this monster is dangerous, so have these kobolds that worship and fear it. You can use the kobolds to help build up the monster and help the players anticipate running into that monster later on.
Right. You can build up that anticipation and fear. And that's the other fun part about kobolds is, unlike goblins, and especially not like gnolls, a kobold is actually going to talk to you or each other. So while a goblin, you could try to, when you're about to kill it, the goblin might be like, don't kill me, don't kill me. I feel like if you're trapped by kobolds, which is a hilarious thing to be if you're an adventurer, or if you're facing kobolds down, you could absolutely haggle with them. You could absolutely say, hey, listen, we don't want to slaughter every single one of you. We just want to pass. Let us go through this area and we'll let you know where, let's say, a gnome settlement is or where a gold hoard could be. Something that amplifies their wanting to be a dragon and also their racial blood feud to gnomes, which we'll get into later. It is a fun thing.
It is.
But when you actually look at building a trap with a kobold, it's nice to know that you have options as a DM. And the fact that if you're about to kill a kobold, it might say, please don't kill me. You know, a gnoll isn't going to do that. A gnoll isn't going to build a trap. A gnoll is a raider. It's a hyena demon person who's going to just roll up on you and stab you, and that is it. Like, that's the long and the short of what they are as people. A kobold, like, different kobolds in a tribe could also be trying to aspire to different things. They could try to be spellcasters, or they could try to be artificers, or they might try to acquire new magic items to help their tribe and amplify themselves. So there's options as a DM when you're building a trap for them and when you're role-playing with them. It could be a lot of different things you could be using when you present a kobold. So when you are making a dungeon with kobolds, let's say, or something in their area or tribe, what are some things you really like to enjoy in the traps you make and the kobolds you use? What is the flavoring that you kind of draw yourself to?
All right, so the flavoring I like about kobolds is that they're aware that they get killed a lot. They're aware that a kobold life is a short and difficult life.
What if the Goomba knew he was going to get stomped?
Exactly. So Goombas and Koopas, they just trundle for you and act surprised when you kill them. Kobolds know that they're very squishable. So they love to turn the tables any way they can, get any advantage they can. If you want to go to the extreme, you can go full Tucker's Kobold, which I do not recommend. I'm not even going to explain it because it's a bad idea. But you can use the weaknesses of kobolds to amplify their communal nature. Because this is one of the weird things about kobolds is they do work for a kind of greater good of the tribe. Like they are self-interested and they're looking out for themselves. But unlike your goblins or your orcs, you could see a kobold sacrificing itself for the good of the tribe. And that can have a lot of fun implications if you want to. That means that a couple kobolds could lead a vanguard or lead people into traps, endangering themselves. You can use the small sized kobolds to maneuver through tiny little tunnels that you can't get through as a Goliath or a Warforged. A Warforged isn't going to be able to get through a 2-foot tall tunnel, but a kobold can get in, get out, and you can use the weird bits of kobolds to create unusual situations in that initial dungeon delving situation.
It is actually kind of fun in the sense of when you mentioned the thing about a kobold sacrificing itself for the tribe's greater good, it kind of reminds me of like you're a giant and you're walking into a tiny civilization.
Yes.
And they have hopes and dreams, but you're at almost all times powerful enough to squash them, like at all times. Yeah, once you hit level 3, man, you're a kobold killing machine from then on out. And they don't really, unless they're working for a big bad, they don't really fluctuate all that much in challenge rating.
No,
unless the DM starts to like really pile on, you know, a rot grub cannon and a Vorpion blade and a helm of fear and all these different, you know, gives the kobold tribe like the deck of many things or something like that, or some kind of omega artifact. You're always going to be able to kill kobolds, which makes the power dynamic interesting when you're dealing with them. Because an adventuring party is going to fear a dragon. They're going to fear mind flayers, a lich like me. They're going to fear these things. But if you're like a level 10 party and you come across some kobolds, I mean, are you worried? You know, which, if you're a DM, I think that could really help you in a plot twist. If they come across some kobolds And fun fact, maybe they actually have like a wyvern chained up somewhere or some kind of, like you mentioned, they have pets.
Yes.
So you see these kobolds and you're like, oh, we're going to fuck them up. But somehow these kobolds, let's say, know where a Bahir's lair is and they lead you to it. And it's a trap in a sense. They're tricksy. They're these little fucking gremlin things that are able to, steal things. I know they like to steal gold and kind of sneak in and take things and hide in the night.
They are extreme scavengers.
Yeah, they're not, like you said, they're not raiders, but you kind of, as a DM, you get these very creative possibilities of how can I use this tribe of nothings to surprise my party, especially when they start hitting those higher levels. D&D is almost 5e is not ready for anything past level 10 half the time. So if you have a level 10, 12, 13 party and there's a bunch of kobolds who like, yeah, they do their little knick-knack thing and they're like, oh, these guys, I remember level 2, fireball, or try to just wipe them out. It could be a fun plot twist to have them kind of turn the tables. And that's kind of the whole existence of the kobold. It's being on the lower end of power and constantly trying to use tricky, hot nonsense to turn the tables on a greater foe.
Yeah.
They really are that David and Goliath story, which is why I think so many players like playing kobolds. Which brings me to the new other question I have. When it comes to playing a kobold, what are your suggestions to play a kobold?
Okay, so playing kobolds is a little bit unusual because a kobold is a species that most people in the world will probably want to hunt on sight.
Right, they're kind of a pest.
Yes, they're very much the kind of species that you go pay someone to clear out a nest of.
Right.
If you are one of those, you're going to be on the outskirts of society. You're not going to be a well-respected kobold. That just isn't a thing. It's just not. So you're gonna have to figure out an angle where your usefulness outweighs your drawbacks. The difficulties that you bring from being a kobold, because a lot of kobolds, the race is technically a lawful evil race in standard origins. So a lot of kobolds do have, even if they're a hero, air quotes, they're going to have some selfish tendencies. They're going to be a little bit schemy, a little bit looking out for number one, because they kind of have to. The world will just crush them.
Right.
You're going to have to find an angle where you're useful to the party and they'll tolerate your quirks.
Well, that's kind of why I think a class that I see a lot of kobolds in is Artificer. You're building things, which plays into the concept of traps for kobolds being schemy little guys. You don't see a lot of barbarian kobolds. As fun as that might be as a concept, over time, it's just not going to work. To the point where, here's how much of a pest or a weakling kobolds are considered, besides the lore about them dying at 12, is that they have one of the only negative modifiers in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. What is it? Is it 1 or 2 to strength? I think it's 2.
I believe it's -2 to strength.
Yeah, which I think the only other one might be orcs for intelligence. I'm not sure, but negative modifiers have not been anywhere in the 5th edition through the thousands of races they've released. And kobolds are so considered weaklings and pathetic little minion creatures that I don't even think you can play a goblin. I don't think a goblin has a negative modifier.
Goblins only get bonuses.
Yeah, that to me, when you look at it, reveals the mindset on a meta level of what a kobold is. Not just what they are as a playable race or something that you work at killing, but on a greater level, the very mechanics of the game believe that kobolds are pathetic. So when you're a kobold, it's you against the world, man. You are the definition of an underdog, which I think players love. I think the quirky underdog is an archetype that, first of all, is not seen that much outside of their nemesis, the gnome, and it's kind of fun. It's cool to imagine a underdog rising to like a level 20 character and fighting a Tarrasque, a kobold who's unlocked the arcane arts and is just using like the gate spell or some shit to summon some otherworldly monstrosity to fight a Tarrasque is epic. Because first of all, that should be a pest. Kobolds are not known to do that. And second, it's just fun to see something small rise up to be something powerful.
Right.
I actually had a friend once who decided to make, just as flavoring, the lich, the bad guy lich of his campaign to be a kobold. What was first like a quirky joke ended up making the party just eliminate kobolds everywhere. They're like, yeah, we know what you could be down the road. We need to eliminate you now. Yeah, as a player, I think there are classes that you can lean into. That negative modifier, I'm sorry. I know a lot of people who thinks that's total bullshit, and I kind of agree with them, because there are other races that you could make the argument should have a negative somewhere, and to have that holdover from earlier editions sneak into 5e is kind of silly in my opinion.
I think it's integral to the underdog mentality, though.
Yeah.
In earlier editions, most races had a variation off of humans. So it was, here's what you're good at relative to humans, here's what you're worse at relative to humans. But that's not the idea in 5e. It's kind of just like a power scaling, what are you good at?
Well, I think actually, first of all, the template for D&D now, for some reason, is tabaxi. But anyways, they're becoming more common than humans. The furries are taking over. I'm kidding. If you play tabaxi, you're not a furry. Don't get sad. But I agree that the underdog mentality is good. I just know that there's a lot of people that's just like, hey, man, just give me my +1 in intelligence and leave me alone. You know, like just don't do anything else to me. But you are right. That mentality of a kobold is weak and a Goomba and a minion and is one to be crushed. It's almost as though, like, if you were to take the authors out of it and put your head in the world of D&D, it's almost like the gods specifically designed kobolds to die, which is what the designers made them for. And it speaks volumes. A kobold's relationship with death is frequent. What do they live to, like 12 years old is like the max of a normal kobold lifespan for most? From murder.
This fluctuates from edition to edition. It's universally agreed that they don't live long, but it's kind of varied whether that's because they just will die or if they'll get killed before they get to that point. Oh. So there's some editions where they can live for hundreds of years, but you won't find any above 30. And there's other editions where they just have tiny little lifespans. Right. So it depends.
I kind of look at them as they could live a long, long time, but they have the murder rate of like chickens in America. Chickens have a 100% murder rate. And it's not just murders, it's accidents, which is also probably why they're, fun. They're so squishy that when they're building traps, they'll fall into it or they'll stab themselves with a spear in a spike pit or, Yeah. I remember playing with you. You threw kobolds at our 3.5 party. You had kobolds jumping on each other's spears by accident and tripping and not being much of a threat, which I think is hilarious. That was actually my introduction to my first ever back and forth with kobolds, and it was very comedic.
Well, yeah, because they give you the opportunity to be a bit lighter in tone with your death. That's a weird statement, but they are less directly a dangerous monster to your party than a lot of creatures. Like you mentioned earlier, people are going to be scared if they fight orcs. Orcs are a threat. Kobolds are a threat, but they're also just a threat to themselves at the same time. So you got this weird dynamic.
A new player is going to fight a kobold, and their first fight with a kobold, they're going to crush them. Mm-hmm. So going forward, if they ever have to deal with kobolds again, they're going to go, well, I think I got this. It's not like their first interaction with, let's say, a gelatinous cube even, where they get eaten up alive or something like that. It's a lot more horrific. Kobolds feel like just yeah, I could take on 10 right now and probably be fine at any time, which is crazy to think about. They are customizable, and I think it's one of the reasons why not only are they in the zeitgeist of a favorite monster in D&D to the point where they're playable, but I think they've become the quintessential minions in D&D. I think just from the variety you get from role-playing with them to what you can do with them in the wider world, to how their traps work, to how they burrow around, and the fact that they look like dragons, which helps. That honestly helps.
No, yeah.
If you're a new adventurer and you see something that resembles a dragon, you'll want to fight it because you're an adventurer. You fight dragons. That's what you fucking do.
Half the name.
Yeah. I honestly think kobolds are not as famous, but they're in the D&D Hall of Fame of iconic monsters, along with like beholders and mind flayers, maybe the purple worm. You know, you get it. Maybe the purple worm. I have no idea how affectionate people are to the purple worm at all. But kobolds are that quintessential minion that you're always going to fight. And while goblins are fun, and gnolls can be fun, and orcs can be fun, I feel like there's just more to play around with a kobold. So,
yeah,
we teased the blood feud. The trixiest little creatures in D&D, fun fact, fucking hate each other. To the point where if a kobold sees this kind of race, they will become hostile, which is something they usually aren't. And kobolds become kind of like raiders to this one race, which are the gnomes, the humble gnomes, those tricksy little gnomes, those creative little bastards. Can you tell us what is the billion-year beef between kobolds and gnomes?
It's like a deity-level prank. I was actually sad. I learned that it's different now in 5e.
Oh, okay.
It's like a maze thing now. But originally, the old school explanation, Kurtulmak, the god of kobolds, had his like massive tribe cave just got it collapsed on him by Garl Glittergold, the god of the gnomes. And it's just been like a prank war since then, to the point that they now just hate each other and will kill each other on sight.
Right.
In 5e, it's like he's trapped in some sort of maze thing. So maybe that's the evolution of that prank war, is now the kobolds lost and their god's stuck in a maze somewhere.
Right.
But to me, I like the petty nature of it. It's just, it fits both races.
Oh, very much so. I mean, I know in 5e, it's something more akin of the kobold god. What's his name again?
Kurtulmak?
He was working for Tiamat. He was doing some evil shit. And Gar Grittagold was like, I'm going to take him down a peg. Which is sad because as god of the kobolds, he was already down a peg working for Tiamat. And Glittergold basically does vicious mockery a ton and says, come after me, and runs into a maze. Kobold god rushes into the maze. And while they're in this crazy maze, Gar Glittergold flips him off. The joke on the internet is, you just got gnomed, and then poofs into glitter. And and the kobold god is just stuck there. And by the way, you just got gnomed is something I've seen all over the internet. It's one of my favorite little taglines to dealing with gnomes. You just got gnomed, bro. What's funny about that is not only does that lean into gnomes being kind of fey tricksters, but it also explains that even the god of kobolds is pathetic to a certain extent. We did goblins, and the goblin god, whose name escapes me, he slew the rest of the goblin pantheon and is this intimidating figure who's building and amassing an army. It's interesting to see that minion race, or it also includes bugbears and hobgoblins, but you get it, that early level challenge rating, their god still being warlike and something intimidating, and having the kobold god be not only pathetic, but tricked by the greatest asshole deity of all the multiverse, Garl Glittergold. I gotta say, it is funny when you play a gnome or when you play a kobold, if they're in the same party, I say play that up. I say enjoy that racial beef. It's kind of like elves and dwarves, only on a much smaller, kind of more pathetic, insular level. Because dwarves and orcs and dwarves and elves and dwarves and anybody, but those racial beefs feel big, like they feel cosmic in a weird way. They're debate over who gets dominion over Earth. This was a petty prank by Gar Glittergold that the kobolds have never fucking forgotten. To the point where I know in 5e, one of the reasons why kobolds seek out magic items, well, magic is good, and magic got our homeboy stuck in the maze or the cave or whatever. Let's get magic items so that we can release him, get him out of there, or get revenge on Gar Glittergold. I think that's hilarious. I think it's a great little tale for the Fey ancestry of the gnomes, and I think it's a great fundamental tale to help really encapsulate what a kobold is. They think they're hot shit, but they're easily fooled, and that's a lot of fun to play around with.
Yeah.
You said you have a list of fun kobold facts. Give me some kobold facts.
Okay. Some of these are true, and some of these are things that kobolds wish you thought were true. So, for example, kobolds like to claim they invented Draconic. That's stupid. I don't believe that.
Kobolds claim that
they invented the written language Draconic. So that's the language that all magic everywhere is written in. Their argument is that dragons don't need to write stuff down, but that's stupid.
That is very stupid, but I love it. That's
It's a fun claim. It's a fun claim. That epic level tome of magic,
yeah,
kobolds invented it.
I love the idea that kobolds have like some grade A, under A, fake news horse shit that they try to peddle people when they're just hanging out at a tavern. If a kobold is allowed in the tavern and he gets a drink with the rest of the party, he's going to lean over and he's going to be like, oh, what's that, Dragonborn? You speak Draconic? Do you know how to write it? No, that came from my people. That's pretty good.
It's a great, obviously untrue, but great thing to rumorify. That's a word.
I would say so. What else do you got?
All right, this is less of a rumor and more just a weird kobold thing. Urds are kobolds with wings. So there's just occasionally a kobold that's born with wings. It varies from source to source, whether that's deified as being closer to a dragon or just kind of rejected off of another petty deity grudge to the god of Urds, who was like Kurtulmak's like subordinate who betrayed him in like a petty way. And so they get shunned for that. I don't remember the name of the Urd deity, but they're kobolds with wings. That's about the long and the short of it. They're not any stronger, but they have wings, so they can fly. They live in caves, so flying is of questionable use, but they can fly.
When a kobold has wings, though, that must be a power trip, I'd imagine, right? If you're taking it from the stance that they're closer to dragons.
Right. So if it's taken from the stance that they're closer to dragons, then an Urd is one of the most respected members of a tribe of kobolds. Maybe a leader, maybe a one who gets trained in magic. If you're seeing an Urd in a tribe, chances are it's important to that tribe. You use an Urd as a kobold leader to give them some variety, give them a little bit of extra flair. If you're going on the angle of them being outcasts, that's got a lot less to play with, in my opinion.
Right.
So I prefer the version where they're revered as, hey, look, it's a kobold that's closer to being a dragon.
Yeah, that would make more sense to at least the aesthetic. Funny name.
It is a weird name.
That would definitely make a little bit more sense to what is actually going on, I guess.
Last one I got is definitely the weirdest one I found. So
okay.
One of the classic kobold pets is giant weasels. So we're talking like a 4-foot tall weasel.
How big is your average weasel? I don't know how big a fucking weasel is.
Not that big. Weasel's like maybe cat size, maybe a bit bigger.
Okay.
So we're talking like a wolf-sized weasel.
Okay.
So they can ride them sometimes. And
that's a big weasel.
It's a big weasel.
Oh,
It's a big weasel with big teeth.
that's a big weasel.
What I found fascinating is there's reports about kobolds having so many weasels around that they get weasel lycanthropy.
What?
Which I have never heard about before.
Wait, time out.
So you get kobold wereweasels.
Okay, time out. Are you telling me that these little lizard nothings hang out with weasels so fucking much that a few of them, when the moon is full, become wereweasels?
Underground.
Oh my god.
Yes.
Oh my god. That's a lot to process. I don't even know. Okay, first of all,
there's a lot of things to unpack there.
Okay, first of all, the DumpStat wereweasel art, t-shirts, hoodies, it's coming. It has to. Number 2, I am going to use kobold wereweasels for now on in every campaign. They have to show up. That's too much fun not to. And okay, when you're fighting kobolds, I think the last thing you think of is a weasel showing up. And the second to last, or the last thing you think of is that kobold you're fighting kind of starting to, like, his pupils dilate and gets furry and large. He's a weasel?
The scales turn into fur for some reason. It's weird.
Patchy? And this is a piece of lore that you found somewhere in the dark, hidden?
I just found that.
Oh my god!
I was looking up kobolds, and there's reports. It's from the Forgotten Realms, so that's a pretty mainstream D&D source. But there's some tribes of kobolds that have enough interaction with weasels that they get wereweasels.
I cannot wait for either people to message us like, "Oh my god, you just broke the weasel story," or people to go, "Yeah, man, kobolds are wereweasels. Where have you been?" There's one of two ways we're gonna get a reaction of people going, "Yeah, man, wereweasels are just they happen with kobolds. That's what they do." And then there's gonna be people going, "What the fuck is that?" That's hilarious.
I'm in the second category.
Well, I also think it's a funny concept of I hang out with an animal long enough, I get lycanthropy from it. Like what happens if you have like a bunch of, I don't know, you're a farmer in D&D and you have to work with cows all day? Do you start mooing in the dead of night? Or is it just kobold's weird immune system or just really able to go were on shit? So if you have a kobold who's hanging out with, like, I don't know, too many blind badgers or whatever, do they turn? Oh my god. All of this. This is too much information.
They do also hang out with bats as well. So if you wanna your Urds, they're werebats. There you go.
Well, I mean,
there's your extra variation if you want to make it more weird.
Werebats isn't as weird as wereweasel. Fun fucking fact.
I agree.
I'm putting my foot down on wereweasel kobolds are the strangest thing I've ever fucking heard of. I've heard of a lot of weird stuff in D&D, and I think this is one of the reasons why, like pieces of lore like that are what make kobolds for people. How do they eat? I don't know. I don't know what they eat. I don't want to ask.
How do they know it's a full moon when they live underground?
Well, maybe it's one of those, we don't really do it by the moon anymore, which is bullshit, by the way. Anytime I've dealt with anything and it's not a full moon, I get annoyed. It's like, what, really? Or I remember I was in a campaign, total side tangent, but we didn't invite a vampire into our house and he came in anyway. It was very unprofessional. I was very annoyed that we didn't invite this guy into our stronghold and then he starts chomping on our necks. And I'm like, bro, you didn't follow Proto. Okay, Proto says that you need to be invited in to murder us. Okay, that's what Dracula says and that's what I say. Would a wereweasel kobold, we're just on this now, I'm sorry, but would a wereweasel kobold be a leader in a kobold society? Would they be outcasts? Right?
I think that's a complicated question. I think it would depend on the tribe. So if you got a tribe that's really in a rough place, I think a kobold that can turn into a 4-foot weasel is gonna rise to the top of that tribe. If you're in a tribe that's working for a dragon, their life is serving this dragon, and then one of them turns into a weasel, I don't think the dragon's gonna like that very much.
Right.
If I was a dragon, I wouldn't like that very much.
Well, no, God, no. If I'm hanging out with a kobold anywhere and they're just like, "Nyeh, nyeh, nyeh, nyeh," and they just turn into a weasel, I'm like, oh God, kill it. A half kobold, half weasel, like that middle bit where most of the lichens live, disgusting.
No.
Murder that. I do like you saying, though, that, well, what tribe would be interested in a wereweasel kobold? A desperate one. A sad, desperate one. But oh, dude, could you imagine you're playing a campaign and you are dealing with a bunch of kobolds and one of them pulls you aside and they're like, get me out of here. And you're like, why? And they're like, we're working for a black dragon who wants to kill us if we do anything wrong. And I'm a wereweasel. I'm on the top of this murder list, buddy. Get me the fuck out of here. I have no idea. That's just insane. That honestly, can I here's some headcanon for you?
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like a glitter gold prank. That sounds like Gar Glittergold cursed the kobolds.
You like those weasels so much, do you?
Yeah, like it sounds like you just got gnomed. I don't want to say that's what that is, but I've hung out with enough gnomes to realize when some gnome shit went down, and that sounds like some straight up gnome shit. Oh my God.
I buy it.
Yeah, right? Totally. Gar's terrible. Gar's an asshole. Let's get that out of the way, too. Find someone respectable in the gnome pantheon. Like, who's the deep gnome head? The crafting guy. Oh, Colderin Smooth Hands. Yeah, go with Smooth Hands. Don't go with Glitter Gold. Hang with Smooth Hands. I know the deep gnomes are kind of dicks, but they're not like Drow or anything like that, really. They're actually kind of the chiller people in the Underdark. Hang with them.
They're the nice people down there.
They really are. It's them and Floomps, man. Dude, we're gonna have a roundtable Floomp episode down the road, too. We're gonna have fucking 10 people be like, discuss Floomps. I feel like there needs to be a Kobolds part 2 where we just sit down and we debate the merits of the wereweasel. That's just going to stick with me for a long period of time.
It was definitely the weirdest bit of D&D lore that I've come across in a couple years.
Yeah, like it really takes the cake. It's one of those things where as a DM, when you look at it, you're like, there's possibilities here. I just don't know what they are.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's usable. I don't know how. And I'm going to have to pray about it for a couple of years to actually get there. So I kind of want to end this on, do you have a favorite Kobold story? Whether you were playing Kobolds as a player or where you used Kobolds to harm a party or something along those lines.
I generally tend to use Kobolds as a reprieve for my players, where they've just been through something a little bit nasty, and I give them Kobolds to help them kind of catch their legs again.
Right.
You can use Kobolds very nasty. I know people are going to mention Tucker's Kobolds. You can have your Kobolds use guerrilla tactics and murder holes and crossbows for days, but it's not fun. And I think Kobolds are best used as a speed bump in the tension. If you're playing a Kobold, it gives you free reign to mess with stuff. Just don't get attached to your character. I think if you're playing a Kobold, you should expect your character to meet an early demise and kind of make peace with that. It's how you play a Kobold well.
Right. You should. Kobolds have a very, I guess you might say, blunt understanding of death. And and it's probably something that they see a lot, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So you use them as kind of a pick-me-up for your players after they've done something.
I use them as a pick-me-up with an undercurrent of, hey, if you do mess up, these Kobolds will pounce on your weakness.
Okay.
So they're not like a complete pushover.
Right.
You throw some tricks in, you throw some ways that they can turn the tables, because that's what's fun about Kobold encounters, is the shift of power. It puts the players in kind of the aggressor upper hand, but they have to be careful not to lose it, because the Kobolds have lots of tools to turn it around if they do
like
get
becoming a wereweasel. That's a big turnaround.
Like becoming a wereweasel.
That's a big plot twist. That's a big one. That's an uncomfortable win. That's almost an immediate victory on their end.
If you make your players scared of your Kobolds, then you've done the Kobold's job.
Right, which is impressive, frankly. Is there an encounter you've made with Kobolds that you're proud of?
I think my favorite one was you open it up by knocking your classic Ewok swinging log to knock somebody into a pool of piranhas. You just whump into piranhas, and then you attack while they're distracted trying to rescue their friend. It's that kind of low-tech but high-danger traps that I think epitomizes the Kobold.
It's very Ewok-ish in the actual traps that you're going to use. Mm-hmm. Maybe a little bit more technologically advanced than Ewoks.
Oh, yeah, you can throw in some spikes.
Right.
They have a weird affiliation for alchemy, if you want. Again, like gnomes. I feel like there's a missed opportunity for the gnome-kobold, like, evil opposite combination there, because they are so much alike and they absolutely hate each other.
Well, that's the fun of it, that they're the two tricksy races, these tiny tricksy guys who have a lot of similarities, but I actually think it might be a little bit more one-sided. I don't know if they absolutely hate each other mutually. I feel as though most of the hate is from kobolds to gnomes than the other way around, because gnomes are too busy, tricking people and kind of being a dick most of the time. They're fayish, so that's the big difference between a hobbit and a gnome. A gnome and a hobbit are different in the sense that a hobbit is lucky. They're the Shire lucky. They're prosperous. A forest gnome is coming out of the forest. He's got his plans. He's got schemes. He might be a good guy, but he likes a good prank.
Oh yeah.
He loves to see you fall into goo, as you've mentioned, which kobolds like. They're not good people, is what I'm getting at. Fuck Faye. You just got gnomed. It's not good. I will say that for me, one of my favorite traps that I didn't actually use against a party, but that I fell into, we had kobolds who were they were up in the tunnels. They had this elevated platform, and there are these little holes where they would peep their heads out, and you would try to poke them and try to get them out of the ceiling like whack-a-mole, just reverse. It was very hard to hit them and handle them because we were so low level, and they would just mock us from these little holes.
Oh, they weren't even attacking you.
No, they were, in the sense of their plan, quote unquote plan, was to distract us. So the premise is they're down there hollering, yelling, distracting you. They also had fishing wire with hooks, they're trying to steal shit from our pockets. It was very rude, and we're like, fuck these guys. Oh, I want to kill them. I can't get a hold of them. And we were also mostly a melee party, so it's a lot of barbarians and fighters going, get down here, you little bitch. And we didn't notice that we were casually walking into a gelatinous cube.
Ooh.
We were so focused on trying to kill these little guys and whack-a-mole them that we turned a corner and two of us just right in. Very uncomfortable. And right when we were trying to get them out is when the kobolds started firing little arrows and crossbows and jumping down from the ceiling. Mm-hmm. It was a really fun encounter about how our DM went about it. And also, to insult a kobold is fun, because they're not coming up with yo mama jokes, but he kept saying your head looks big, or one of them was, we had a drow who had fangs. We had a drow member who was trying to do the whole vampire thing. So very brooding, very rogue. Mm-hmm. And these kobolds just kept being pick a different color other than black. Your teeth look weird. Fix your teeth. They were very childish insults. But when you're a fucking melee party and you just can't get your hand on a fucking kobold, and if you touch them once, they're dead. Once! It really was fun and infuriating all at the same time. So I feel like that's what kobolds are. Mm-hmm. Aleric, thank you for joining me today. I think we went over a ton. Is there any closing things you want to mention about kobolds before we dip?
Last little tidbit. You can have your kobolds riding velociraptors, and it doesn't sound weird.
Is that just, if they're a wereweasel, I'm sorry to still be on this. That is weird now. It's just going to follow me I'm going to be laying awake at night just thinking about what does it mean? What does it mean? It feels like a Zen question puzzle box where you're just I can't figure this thing out. It doesn't make any sense. But them on Velocity. Yeah, a dinosaur setting for kobolds does make sense.
Oh, yeah. You can definitely do dinosaurs with kobolds. If you're in a more jungly place, you can do that as a pet variation very easily.
That shows how kobolds are able to kind of be flexible to move about different environments. And that's the fun part. They're the minion's minion. Mm-hmm. They're kind of the ultimate in that way because they're flexible to be put in multiple places and can work for multiple big bads. And you can do a lot with what you're given. And also, like 20 kobolds riding a T-Rex is fun.
Yeah.
With that, you've ultimately served your purpose, Aleric.
Oh, no.
I'm going to have to kill you now.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So put your head forward. You're a kobold. You're used to this. Just stand right there. Okay. Mm-hmm. Good. Ha. May. Ha. May.
You've just been listening to DumpStat, a podcast presented by Horizon Kingdoms. Horizon Kingdoms is a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition server that's free to play. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and join up on Discord to join in on a new adventure. For more DumpStat, be sure to find us on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe.